Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Ringside Cinema. I am Money Mike, and today we are going to be looking at the prospects of more two-night events in WWE based on a new report stating that the WWE is looking at more two-night events as early as even next year. The 2026 Royal Rumble could be a two-night event. We already have a two-night SummerSlam. So I'm going to look at this a little bit more, and I'm going to talk about it more in the short term, long term. And while on the subject of the Royal Rumble, go ahead and check out my video I did talking about John Cena potentially winning the 2025 Men's Royal Rumble. But what about a two-night Royal Rumble? Two-night Survivor Series? Hell, even the new report from WrestleVotes even said that there's even talk of a two-night Money in the Bank in the future. Now, this whole two-night event thing probably would never have happened if it wasn't for the pandemic, because we got to go back 4 years, basically almost 5 years at this point, as we are just a few days away from 2025. That the WWE, because of the pandemic, no audience, we had no fans, that they made WrestleMania 36 a two-night event. They said it was too big for one night. And so they did WrestleMania Saturday, WrestleMania Sunday. And obviously, that made a lot of people wonder, are they going to stick to this? And, when the fans come back. And so the next year, WrestleMania 37, basically Tampa Bay got a makeup for WrestleMania 36, where they said, hey, we're going to give you a two-night event. And so they pretty much stuck with the two-night WrestleMania events since the pandemic in WrestleMania 36. And, for a lot of fans, people said, you know what? It's WrestleMania. It makes sense. Two-night events. It works because it's your biggest show of the year. And then last year, WWE announced the two-night event for SummerSlam coming to Minneapolis in 2026. Now, this was supposed to be the first two-night SummerSlam event, okay? Now, this also stems from the fact that Minnesota lost out to Las Vegas for WrestleMania 41. So there was a lot of rumors saying that Minnesota was going to get WrestleMania 41, but I think they kind of switched it to Las Vegas. And so Minnesota was like, hey, you promised us a two-night event. What are you going to do about it? And then WWE said, hey, we'll give you SummerSlam in 2026 for being a two-night event. And then, of course, WWE would then announce a two-night SummerSlam coming to MetLife Stadium at 2025, which means that they don't get the first two-night SummerSlam. Now it's in New York, technically New Jersey, because they're not advertising it as New York, New Jersey. It's technically stated as New Jersey. But the first two-night SummerSlam will now be in 2025 at MetLife Stadium. And now you do have to wonder, with MetLife getting the two-night SummerSlam in 2025, SummerSlam 2026 in Minnesota is a two-night event. This does make you wonder if the 2025 Royal Rumble is going to be the last one-night Royal Rumble that we will see going forward, as 2026 could very well be a 2-night Royal Rumble, which, again, I think that makes perfect sense. I think when you look in the grand scheme of things, when the WWE did add the Women's Royal Rumble in 2018, it made sense. It made a lot of sense to give the women something else, to give them their own Royal Rumble. And it was all part of this whole women's evolution thing that the WWE was promoting, so it made sense. But that also kind of made the card for one-night Royal Rumbles a little bit tiring, because now you have fans sitting through 2 Royal Rumble matches in one show opposed to 1. So yes, in the grand scheme of things, having a 2-night Royal Rumble where you have one night the women Royal Rumble headlines Saturday, the men's headlines on Sunday, and you can alternate depending on the story of the match and who wins. You could have the women close out on Sunday, the men's Royal Rumble closes out Saturday. You can alternate back and forth. But I do question, beyond the Royal Rumble, beyond WrestleMania, SummerSlam, and Royal Rumble, there being more 2-night events. And look, I get it. The WWE right now is doing incredible. They're selling out everywhere they go. They sell out every country they go to. We don't know what, they have this big international tour coming up in March on the road to WrestleMania, and they're probably going to sell out there. And so, they sell out everywhere they go. They've had all this momentum they've been riding for years, right? And so I think for a lot of people, and especially the fans that just want to hate on the WWE, is, this bubble is going to burst. This is when the bubble is going to burst. They can't sustain it, yada, yada, yada. And the question is, when will that bubble burst? And if it does burst and they do more 2-night events, in the short term, with how hot the WWE is right now, with the fact that they are selling out everywhere they go, in the short term, more 2-night events, absolutely makes more sense. If you keep it to the Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, and SummerSlam, sure. But if you were to do a 2-night Survivor Series, I think we saw this year Survivor Series where you don't need to do 2 War Games matches. I think, I'm kind of on board with the idea of what fans were kind of saying, where maybe one year you don't do War Games. Maybe you do the traditional Survivor Series match. Or you do one traditional Survivor Series match for the men, the War Games match goes to the women, or vice versa. War Games is kind of a match that really is based on storytelling. And, the way the WWE did kind of force War Games, like we knew the Bloodline War Games match was coming. Everybody saw that coming from a mile away. It's one of those things where the WWE is kind of like reverting back to the Vince way of thinking, where WWE would have these themed pay-per-views, right? PLEs, whatever you want to call them. And, Hell in a Cell. So, we gotta now book our stories around Hell in a Cell because the pay-per-view is called Hell in a Cell. Or we got TLC, so now we gotta fit our storylines for 1 month into, we need to have a tables, ladders, and chairs match. And that's kind of where we are at with War Games right now, where they're kind of, unless you have a long-term storytelling plan with, like we saw with the Bloodline, then you can do a War Games match. But I think labeling Survivor Series War Games kind of forces your hand into making that happen regardless of the story. is kind of just falls back into that Vince way of thinking of we have a gimmick pay-per-view coming up, so we have to write our stories based around it. So from that perspective, the idea of a 2-night Survivor Series seems okay on paper, So men's War Games match closes out one night, women's closes out the other. Same thing with Money in the Bank. You could have the women's Money in the Bank match close the show. One night, men's Money in the Bank, close the other night. In theory, these make sense on paper, so each match closes out their respective shows. The men get to have their opportunity to close the show. The women get their opportunity to close the show. And that makes sense on paper. But what I really am worried about here is, if that bubble bursts, right? Because if at one point, let's say the WWE starts to cool off. Let's say they start to cool off, they lose a little bit of momentum, and things aren't as hot as they are right now, And fans are just kind of like, they're growing tired of the 2-night events, or they're growing, or it's like, a little bit of fatigue, right? When it comes to these shows. And fans will be like, okay, you know what? These shows were good when it was just WrestleMania. Or when it was WrestleMania and SummerSlam. Now you're overdoing it, right? You're overexposing your talent. We are heading to a new year where we're going to have 3-hour Raws. We have 3-hour SmackDowns. You count on the fact that we have 2-hour NXTs, right? 2-hour episodes of NXT. On top of if you have PLEs, where that will give you an extra 3 or 4 hours. So you're looking at about 8-9 hours worth of content, of WWE content in a given week where you have PLEs. And then if you have 2-night PLEs, that's about over 10 hours of WWE TV in a single week. And that is where I do wonder if the WWE is going to risk in the long term this not working, and the ticket sales aren't there, or the ticket sales aren't there. Fans aren't as interested in 2-night events, and they start to run into issues. Obviously, the cities, countries are going to pay for WWE. We've seen this. We've seen it for the last couple of years. Minnesota's paying for 2-night SummerSlam. New Jersey's paying for 2-night SummerSlam. Indianapolis paid for Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, and SummerSlam coming to Lucas Oil Stadium. Obviously, they're going to love it. And, especially once the WWE does go to Netflix, and you talk about the global expansion where they're going to do more international PLEs. If the WWE does a WrestleMania in London, I was there at Wembley Stadium at All In this year. They do a WrestleMania there. You're talking 2 nights in London. I mean, the UK, London, they're like, we want fans here for 2 nights. We want to make all the money in the world, right? So these cities and countries, they're going to love these 2-night events that the WWE is going to do and bring to their local economies, because that means there's more people buying stuff and sightseeing and tourism and all that other good stuff. But from a fan perspective, this is where I look at this and go, short term, yes, this works. Long term, I don't know if this will work long term. I think if you keep the 2-night events to WrestleMania, SummerSlam, and the Royal Rumble, that's it. Don't do Survivor Series. Don't do Money in the Bank. Don't do like a 2-night Bash in Berlin or 2-night Clash at the Castle. But just stick to a 2-night, for your major shows. SummerSlam, Royal Rumble, WrestleMania. And that's it. 3 times a year for 2 nights, 2-night events, I think is the perfect amount. Anything more than that, I think the WWE is risking 2-night event fatigue. I think they're risking overexposure. And they're going to probably, in the long run, see this as something that is not going to work. WrestleMania next year, is going to be my first two-night event ever. I mean, I've gone to SummerSlam in Detroit, as you can see by my t-shirt. I've gone to WrestleMania 30. I've gone to SummerSlam in Nashville, in Las Vegas, and they are one-night events. So WrestleMania next year for me will be my first two-night event. And so I'm going to be curious to see what mine experience is going to be with these two-night events. Especially as I do plan on going to the Royal Rumble in the future, as that is on my bucket list of things to do. So, yeah. For those who have been to two-night events in the past, comment below. What was your experience like? Did you like it? Do you want more of them? Comment below. And again, as always, I've been your host, Money Mike, and you've been watching Ringside Cinema.
Ringside Cinema, where the battles roar. Ringside Cinema, legends at the core. Tune in, feel the rush. Wrestling meets the screen. Ringside Cinema, living out the dream. Living out the dream. Living out the dream. Lights down, time to go. Cheers for heroes we know. Ringside forever. Oh. Wrestling